Do you know where's one of the first places you gain when you're gaining body fat, gaining weight? Do you know where one of the first places in your body that the fat actually accumulates? Where do you think that might be?
I would guess the belly.
Right? That's what most people think because that's what you can see. My belly's getting bigger, I must be gaining weight. Not true. It turns out one of the most sensitive places that you start to gain body fat as you're gaining weight, and this is true in skinny people as well as big people, larger size body people, is your tongue. Your tongue gets fat. You can get a fat tongue. Now, here's how it works. And this has been studied by people who look at anatomy of the tongue. So the tongue actually has three parts. The tip of the tongue is like Cirque du Soleil. It's like an acrobat. It can do all kinds of fancy things at the very tip. The middle of the tongue is muscular, okay? It is super strong and muscular because it moves food around in your mouth, okay? The back of the tongue is kind of like a big beanbag, and it is marbled with fat, visceral fat, like a ribeye steak. That's normal, healthy. That's the way the tongue is actually made. So when you actually start to gain visceral fat, one of the first places that the visceral fat starts to grow is in the back third of your tongue. Now, how do we know this? This has actually been studied in skinny people, in fact, skinny women. And what happens is that people notice that usually it's the bed partners that say this, that, hey, you know what? You started snoring. Did you know that? You weren't snoring before. Now you're snoring. And the person goes, you know what? Actually, that's really weird because I'm starting to gain a little bit of weight too. And so this is the connection. When you're growing more body fat, your tongue gets fatter in the back of your tongue. And what happens is, think about it. When you're sleeping, you're relaxed. And when you're relaxed, your tongue is also relaxed. And your fat tongue starts to slide back and block your airways. Now you snort. You don't sleep that well. It's called sleep apnea. And you actually snore as well. So snoring is another biomarker of accumulating extra visceral fat in the back of your tongue that actually is indicating that you're actually starting to gain weight and gain body fat.
That's so interesting. And while we're talking about the different types of fat here, one more area I want to dive into. We know we can take certain foods in, they're going to impact stem cells and convert the white fat to the brown fat. You talk about a term in the book, browning of fat. Is that different or is that involve the stem cells?
It's different. It turns out that there are some foods that can also take white, jiggly, subcutaneous, or visceral fat, and the natural chemicals in the foods can basically tap the white fat in the shoulder and go, hey, buddy, you know what, white fat, I'm going to try to convert you to being the good fat, the good brown fat. And so white, the color between white and brown is beige. And so they call that beiging. So certain foods can even convince some of your white fat to turn brown like, so that fat that was once wiggly and jiggly in a fuel tank can start to become fuel burning as well. And this is how powerful foods can be. They elevate your metabolism by burning down fuel, by making more of the mitochondria fat, loaded fat that can burn down fuel, by convincing stem cells to make more of that good kind of fat, and by even convincing the wiggly jiggly harmful fat to actually also become more of that good fat as well. This is really untapped human potential, literally, that is baked into our bodies. It's part of our operating system. And when you realize that foods that we eat can activate the different parts of these systems, you realize that, wait a minute, we don't need to fear our food. We should think about which foods can actually do this. And that all of a sudden really turns the tables on this idea of dieting by deprivation. Now, why don't we set the table and decide what dishes we're actually going to put in front of us with using ingredients that can do that?
Well, let's attack weight loss from a whole different area now. And this is angiogenesis, an area
Mm.
that you're definitely an expert in. And this ties back to a lot of our previous conversations where there's certain foods that can affect blood vessels, either to create more or to lessen and prevent the creation of new vessels. And the reason why this is important, in the past, we've talked about it from a cancer perspective, but tying it into our new topic of metabolism and weight loss, fat as an organ needs a blood supply.
That's
So if
right.
we can attack that blood supply, we can attack weight loss from that angle. So I'll have you take that and explain in
Yeah.
greater detail what I was getting at there.
Okay. Every normal, healthy organ in your body requires a blood supply, including your heart, your kidneys, your liver, and your body fat. Remember, body fat's normal, healthy organ in your body. You need some blood supply. But when fat starts to grow excessively, too much fat starts to grow because you've overeaten. Now you need to clone and stem cells need to make more fat cells to fill up and load up with fuel. And now you haven't finished loading up it. You need another fuel tank. Now you're going to clone it again with more stem cells. Now you got another one. Keep on adding up that copy pasting of the fuel cells of body fat, of fat cells, and now you've got a mound of fat that has outgrown the original fat that is healthy. Now, just like a tumor, when it actually starts to expand abnormally, it requires a blood supply in order to really support its bigger size. So too does fat need a blood supply to go beyond what it normally wants to have. Now, this is actually where, when you expand your body fat, excessive body fat, your fat is desperately growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and it needs more blood supply. So it's whipping around looking for, trying to grow new blood vessels. Usually, it grows faster than the blood vessels can actually feed it. Before, the angiogenesis, the growth of blood vessels isn't fast enough, and so the center of this expanding fat starts to die. It doesn't have enough blood vessels, and so when fat, like a tumor, this happens in a tumor as well. So in a tumor, when the center of the tumor doesn't get enough blood vessels, because enough blood flow, because its tumor is expanding too large, what happens is that kind of necrotic, or like a kind of rotting center, dying center, suddenly attracts inflammatory cells. It becomes very inflammatory. And the inflammation in both tumors and fat actually isn't just stuck in the mass, expanding mass. It leaks out, and now you've got inflammation spilling out from your growing fat everywhere in your body. And as we know, inflammation in the body is very helpful when you have it in small amounts in the right place at the right time. Then it goes away. But if you have chronic leaking, overflowing inflammation in your body that goes everywhere, now it's a setup for autoimmune disease, diabetes, for cancer, heart disease, vision loss, all Alzheimer's, all kinds of really harmful conditions associated with inflammation, which we know is so important. So, one of the things that is actually interesting, that we're tearing a page from the playbook of cancer medicine. So in cancer, you can actually give medicines that can cut off the blood supply to tumors. There are foods that can do the same thing. And so what's really interesting is there are certain foods that can help tame excessive body fat, that can cut off the blood supply, that prevent the tumors from getting bigger and bigger just because they don't have enough oxygen. Eventually, they're going to start to shrink. And that's an anti-angiogenic approach to body fat, to obesity. And that's been shown in the lab to work really well. When you take a look at the foods that actually are also useful for shrinking body fat and improving your metabolism, exactly the same foods that have anti-angiogenic, tumor-starving, and now fat-starving properties as well.
Let's come back to the microbiome piece, another defense system. We
Mm-hmm.
quickly touched on it before, but let's get really practical and specifically from a metabolism weight loss piece, what we want to do to support the microbiome and how the physiology works there.
Okay. Look, almost everyone who's interested in health and wellness has heard of the microbiome. Microbiome is gut bacteria. It's actually bacteria outside of our gut as well, but most of it's in our gut. And, a lot of people don't actually appreciate where in the gut the microbiome actually is located. It's in the last part of your gut, in a little pouchy area in your colon called the cecum. That's spelled CECUM. Most of our gut bacteria is actually found in that spot. It's kind of like the cave of the corridor of the microbiome. That's an ecosystem. And that ecosystem is composed of, somewhere about almost 39 trillion bacteria. Now, we know some of them, but there's more that we're discovering all the time. And by the way, it's not just bacteria. It's viruses, it's fungi. There's a lot of, there's archaea, there's a whole other species of organism that lives in our gut. But let's talk about bacteria for a second. We now know that certain bacteria activate our metabolism. All right. And when you're missing those bacteria, one of them is called Akkermansia muciniphila. When you're missing that healthy bacteria, what happens is your metabolism doesn't function properly. And so you're not drawing in energy the right way. Your fat starts to grow out of control. You're not even when you're eating regularly, you might not actually absorb all your energy efficiently. And so your blood sugars can rise. You develop metabolic syndrome. And so the lack of certain bacteria we know can be problematic. And there are certain foods that can grow back Akkermansia, like pomegranate juice, cranberry juice, Concord grape juice, for example, are ways to actually grow back and help nurture some of these bacteria. We also know, by the way, that when you have extra body fat, remember I told you that inflammation leaks out? I mean, think about like a garden hose. You're filling up a pot in your garden and you forget about it, and the water overflows the pot, and now it's everywhere. It's got dirt everywhere as well. If your fat's inflammation spills out over the sides and leaks everywhere, very, very dangerous, by the way, that situation. It actually is that fat's poison in your blood, or it can poison your liver. That's called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, leaking fat that poisons our organs, highly inflammatory situation. All right. It turns out that our gut microbiome, healthy gut microbiome, all right, not poisoned with too much sugar, artificial sweeteners, ultra-processed foods, all the things sodas, things that really harm our gut microbiome. If you have good, healthy, vibrant gut microbiome, if you have too much body fat and the inflammation leaks up, guess what? Your gut microbiome, which is a health defense system, lowers inflammation. It basically is like the fire department to help put out the inflammation, put out that fire. All right. If your gut microbiome is damaged, it can't put out that fire. And not only is your metabolism screwed up, all right, and your fat is starting to grow and mess up your metabolism further, but the inflammation is leaking out, and now you don't have the fire department to put out that fire.
Hi there. If you enjoyed watching this video, I know you'll love the next one. Stay here and check it out, and I'll see you there.